Hello, my name is Joseph Beige. I'm a real estate attorney on Long Island, and I want to welcome you to today's program. If you're a new viewer to our program, let me explain what we do here, because it's really very simple. We discuss various topics that are related to real estate and that we think would be of interest to you, the Long Island real estate consumer. The goal is also just as simple. We want to educate you, give you a little more information so that you can make a better, more informed decision on your next real estate transaction. Now, today's subject, I think, is really going to be of interest to everybody, regardless of which side of the fence you're sitting on, whether you're a buyer or a seller, and in spoiler alert, even if you're a homeowner and with no intentions of selling. That's because today we're going to be talking about home inspections. They're very well known, but also very misunderstood part of a real estate transaction. Today, to join me and go over home inspections is a friend of mine, and that's Jim Jacobs from Home Sweet Home Inspections. Jim, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Thanks. Before we even start, Jim, we're filming this in November, a couple of days before Veterans Day. I know you were a veteran of the Navy, and I want to thank you on behalf of everybody who's watching for your service to our country.
You're very welcome.
Jim, let's get into Home Sweet Home a little bit and give us a little background on yourself and how you got into the home inspection industry.
Well, I actually got into the home inspection industry almost by accident. Like I said, I was in the Navy. I worked on radar systems, repair and control. And once I got out, I started to go to night school. I wanted to be a real electrical engineer when I grew up. But I couldn't afford to go to school full time, so I had to work. And building houses, I worked with a construction company out east, remodeling, putting extensions on, doing plumbing, electrical. We did everything. And then a friend of mine, Debbie Falcone, she was a real estate paralegal at the time, knew I was going to school and said, "You're an engineer. You inspect this house for my client." And I said, "Well, no, I'm going to school and I want to be an electrical engineer. But yeah, if you need somebody to look at the house, I have the knowledge to do it, and I'll start looking." And within 3 months, it actually became a full-time job, and I never finished school.
That's interesting. You know, it's funny how life finds the path for you sometimes. Now, it's very interesting that you pointed out that, at the time you were going to school for electrical engineering, but had a background in construction. When I started out in real estate as an agent back in the 90s, early 90s, actually, it was kind of almost like the birth of the home inspection industry. And the industry has really matured in the intervening time. I mean, it's a real profession now. And you've been a big part of that. Can you give us a little background on some of those associations?
Well, I started this 30 years ago. I started home inspections. Home Sweet Home Inspection is now 28 years old. When I first started, there was no requirements to be a home inspector. The only state that required a license was Texas, and you had to have a contractor's license. So when I started, it was a piece of yellow paper and a pencil, and you went out and looked and took care of your clients. Over the time, things have progressed. We are now licensed in New York. But even before that, me and 4 other gentlemen, we got together about 25 years ago, and we formed the Metropolitan Association of Home Inspectors. I was also past president of that organization. It's still around today. The American Society of Home Inspections is around, International Society of Home Inspectors. These are all great organizations. Every home inspector should be affiliated with at least one of these for continuing education and more knowledge.
Yeah. And like I said, it really has been something that I've watched that profession mature, and to the point where now, it's better for clients, it's better for everybody involved. And again, thank you for doing that, being involved in that.
When I first started, nobody even knew what a home inspection was. I met my wife, told her what I did for a living, and nobody had a clue.
No, it's and that's important from a consumer standpoint. People know they need an inspection before making a big purchase. I remember back in the day, even myself buying my first home, it was, do I know somebody who's a good contractor? Can you go look at the house for me? Because it hadn't matured to that level yet. Tell us a little bit about Home Sweet Home. I know you said basically how you kind of fell into it, but what kind of areas does Home Sweet Home get inspect?
Well, we cover all of Long Island, from Queens on out to Montauk. Our primary thing is home inspections. We do that. We also have some additionals what we can do if needed, whether it be a windstorm inspection, a cesspool certification. We also opened up a pest control company a number of years back because we saw people getting these termite bait stations and paying a fortune for them. So we opened up that just so we could take care of our clients and give them a better deal, something they need anyway.
I want to switch away from home sweet home and yourself for a little bit, take the emphasis off you. I want to talk about home inspections in general, because I find a lot of clients, whether they're buyers or sellers, have a lot of misconceptions about what they expect. And, for example, sellers think that the home inspector is just going to nitpick and find things that are wrong, and have a negative view. And the buyer sometimes has maybe an overly optimistic view or an unrealistic view about what a home inspector can actually do. So starting from the simple part, what would be a typical report that you would give to a client?
Well, a typical report. Well, let's start with our clients. Our clients, when they come to us, they want the house. So they're not looking for reasons not to buy. They want to understand what they're buying and be comfortable knowing that what they're buying is what they think it is. So yes, we're going to go through that house. We're going to find whether it's structural issue, electrical issue, or even opening and closing windows and doors. Windows and doors can get extremely expensive if you have to replace them. Typically, people don't, when they're looking at a house, they walk in, they see the cosmetics. We have to look at that, but we have to look beyond that. It is a visual inspection, so we're not going to tear the house apart. We're not going to take walls down. But if I see an issue, say at a window where caulking is bad, that's an indication that moisture may have gotten in there. And we have to look a little harder, looking for things that may show up in the future. And that's where experience comes in, because the home inspector, fresh out of school, really doesn't know these things. We passed licensing law a number of years ago, and it really damaged my profession. When I first got into it, you had to have a good construction background. You had to know what you were looking at. Today, New York requires a 100-hour class and 40 hours of following somebody like me around. Now, you're not going to learn a profession in that short of time. You need experience. You need to get out there. Like I said, it used to be the guy that knew what he was looking at. Today, it's a guy that lost his job at a pizza parlor and says, well, I'm going to be a home inspector. So most people that get into it don't really last, because it's a lot more than they realize it was.
That's interesting. So in some ways, while the profession, it has matured as a profession, it's now licensed and there are associations and there's continuing ed requirements. But at the same point, it's in some ways become a little bit easier, because in the past, the only people who felt qualified were coming out of the trades and having more knowledge. I mean, you learn how things don't work once you've seen it. Once you've had to make a repair, you say, okay, now I see how it started. It's an interesting
hiring a home inspector, you want to make sure that they've been in the profession a number of years, that they have certain experience.
And we're going to come back to that, but I want to, about when my tips and tricks that we always do towards the end on interview processes. But staying with the inspection, you did point out that there are limitations. And let's go through a few of those. I know clients very often. The obvious one I always have to point out, you don't have X-ray vision. You can't see what's behind the wall. But it's a little more than that. It's just whatever's not accessible, you can't see, correct?
Correct. And we're really prohibited from moving people's personal items, whether it be a sofa, a couch, or even clearing out their closet full of belongings. I don't know if you'd want anybody coming in your house and touching all your personal items, but we're really not allowed to.
So, okay. Now, what are some of the typical limitations from a buyer standpoint? Because I find once or twice I have had situations where buyers have come to me after a closing, after the house is empty, and they start to move in and they've discovered things. And one of the first things that they do, they want to know if they can go after the seller. And they also then say, well, what about the home inspection? Shouldn't they have found this? And what are some good examples of things that clients should know in advance you can't discover?
Well, that's a big thing, because when you have a home inspection, you have a pre-inspection agreement. This agreement will spell out exactly what you're allowed to look at, what you can't look at. Again, we don't have X-ray vision. We can't see through walls, behind furniture. But we're going looking for indications between a basement and a roof. If we see something off in one area, we know to look further.
And that's where the experience comes in, being able to see the smaller, more discrete evidence of a potential problem, as opposed to the big stuff. Anybody can see a wall that's rotted, sheetrock that's falling down off a wall, moisture in between window panes. But again, the stuff that's hidden from plain view, it's tough for you to see.
Yeah, it is. Home inspection is limited. It is a visual, primarily, inspection that is at the time of the inspection. So we cannot predict what's going to happen. We'll see an older heating system and say, yes, we'll see it's 15 years old, and typically these units go 20 years. So we can plan at 5 years, but that's not a hard and fast rule. I mean, it could go tomorrow or it could last an extra 10 years. So we get to inspect what is there and how it's functioning at the time of the inspection.
Interesting. Now, a big part of a home inspection is uncovering safety issues, electrical issues, things of that nature are a big one. Plumbing issues. I did just have a client with their home inspection that came back indicating that on the water heater, the safety valve was too small, and that can be an explosion, create an increase in pressure. What are the typical safety? Because I know there are some buyers who, especially in the market that we're looking at now, and we're filming this in November of 2021, and there have buyers who are waiving home inspections because they don't want to lose the house. It's part of the competitive bidding process now. And a big part that they're letting go, not just the structural, is safety. So what are some of the safety issues that you as a home inspector focus on? Well,
you brought up electrical items. Loose wires, hanging wires, open junction boxes, even the outlets themselves, if they're not properly grounded or properly polarized. Even if you don't know what that is, typically you'll know there's a white and a black wire. They can be put on the opposite side and things will function properly, but you're more likely to get a shock if something goes wrong. So making sure that these are set up properly. And as a home inspection, we cannot see them all. Like I said, there will be furniture in the way. There will be other things, stored items. So we can test random number of outlets in each room. Same thing with windows and doors. They may be obstructed. So we can do a certain amount of the work. But as far as protecting a homeowner, if we find an outlet that's not properly wired, a lot of times I'll hear back that which outlet, and we cannot put in our report which outlet. We want to protect our client, their safety. If we put in the third outlet in the north bedroom is improperly wired, an electrician will come in, fix that outlet. But if that one's wrong, there's going to be others behind the sofa or the kitchen table, something. This way, if we put in, you just have to find them. An electrician will come in, check and fix all of them, not just the ones that we were able to find at the time of the inspection.
It's interesting. It's interesting because it has come up a question a few times, on reports where sellers say, I'm willing to do the repair. Tell me where it is. And that's been a little general, and it's led to a few emails back and forth trying to determine which one is it.
And like I say, you got to make sure the client is protected. Same thing with windows. I am not going to climb on someone's bed to open a window. But at the time of the walkthrough, this is the most important time for our clients. They need to slow down, take the time, not just look around, figure out where furniture is going to go, but open and close windows and doors. You could bring a little electric tester and you could test outlets that we couldn't even see. And if you're going to have an electrician or a plumber or somebody come in and do some work, make sure that they're licensed and you have receipts that those items were repaired.
And again, we used electric as an example, but that would also be similar for the heating system, making sure it has enough carbon monoxide detectors, COs, and so forth. Not so much of a problem or an issue in Long Island with homes, residential homes, is the lead testing. But I know radon, gas, and some other things were an issue. Is a typical home inspection cover issues like that?
Well, as far as radon is an issue, most places in the United States, here on Long Island, we're pretty clear from that. Radon is a naturally occurring radioactive gas that's produced from bedrock. We're a sandbar made by a glacier. Our bedrock is 200 to 400 feet down out here. So even if radon did make it here, the tests that are available wouldn't even detect those levels.
We started to talk a little bit about Home Sweet Home, and you said you covered Long Island, North Shore, South Shore, all the way east to Montauk, I assume.
Indeed.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about your typical clients. I assume most of your typical clients are purchasers, buyers of real estate. And again, just describe the typical client and the typical interaction when they first contact you.
Well, the first contact, they will contact my office, and the paralegal that I spoke about earlier, Debbie Falcone, she is now my business partner. So she is our first contact with our clients. She'll find out what they need, how, when they need it. As far as the home inspection, when they show up on site, before I start my home inspection, I will sit and speak with them for a while, finding out what their particular interests are, what their concerns are. actually even how much knowledge they have with homes, so I know how to explain things to them.
So, for example, you tailor it, it sounds like. So a client who says, listen, I'm renovating the house. I'm not worried about the sheetrock. I'm tearing everything apart. But they still may want to make sure that their foundation is good because they're gutting the inside, but they want to know that they don't have to go for a $15,000 or $20,000 roof, things of that nature.
And then you have other people that have no idea what a hammer or a screwdriver does. So when we explain things to them, we have to make sure that they understand what we're saying. Like I said, they're not looking for a reason not to buy the house, but they need to understand what they're buying so they can be comfortable moving forward.
It's interesting that you said that because one of the first real estate transactions that I handled as an attorney, not as a real estate agent, was for a friend of mine. And I remember his wife coming in tears because they had found their dream home, had a home inspection, and they were like, we can't afford this. Look, we're going to have all this money and all this work that's going to be done. And I said, well, let's go through the report. And there were things that were in there such as a loose banister. And it was down as like a $500 repair. And I remember looking at it and saying, is your husband capable of putting a lag bolt in? And she goes, of course. He rebuilds cars. And that's what it is. But the home inspector did his job right. He pointed it out and he gave an estimate of the cost based on what the union carpenter would go, which was a reasonable measuring stick, but it created an unreasonable expectation or negative expectation for my client. So that's a nice point that you actually sit down with the client and make sure that they understand what you're saying on a level that they can grasp. What's important, what's not important, what's in their realm to be able to fix, and what they should ask maybe a seller to do as part of the transaction.
Yeah, well, the average person doesn't really understand construction. I went into a house. The deal fell through before I was there from another client because there was 4 feet of rotted sill plate. Now, a sill plate sits on top of the foundation, and the whole house sits on that sill plate. So all they know is that the foundation of this house was bad. Now, this was 4 feet of rotted sill plate. It was a $600 repair. It was a $400,000 house. It didn't become a big deal once they understood what it was.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a great service is that, and I try to do that as an attorney too, is not just let people know in the abstract there's a problem. You let them know, put it into perspective so that they can make a reasonable decision. Could you imagine that client finding out, especially with the house values going the way they are, that they lost out on their dream house for a $600 repair because They thought it sounded worse than it was to them.
That's why it's just as important to explain what you're finding as, yes, you're going to find issues with the home, but they have to be put in perspective.
Yeah. And again, staying on that point, there is no house that's in a perfect 100% condition. And ironically, what I tell clients when they're purchasing new construction, new construction homes will actually have more issues initially than an older home because that house has to settle, go through a couple of seasons of, warm temperatures, cold temperatures, freezing, and so forth. And, that house that's been there for 30, 40, 50 years, you know what you have. You can inspect it and know exactly because most of that is done. I want to move on a little bit. Now, there are a couple of specific inspections that can be done on request that aren't your typical home inspection. One of them you mentioned was a cesspool certification. What is a cesspool certification?
Well, cesspool certification has changed over the years. A number of years back, it was pretty much a joke in the industry. Most areas in the country have what's called a leaching field. We have cesspools, large catch basins. We're collecting our stuff. And a cesspool certification was any licensed contractor going into the home, running the water, and nobody could agree whether it was 20 minutes or 40 minutes. Well, all the water was running, the bathtub was filling up, letting the bathtubs drain, and if nothing backed up, it was certified. Now, in most of the country, like I said, they had leach fields. These were pipes that went out into the field. And if we did that and it was bad, it would clog up very quickly. Our cesspools are huge tanks, and we could run this water for 17 hours. And if the pool was bad, it still may not fill up the time we're there.
Gotcha.
So people had these cesspool certifications mainly because the banks wanted them. And when I first started doing this 30 years ago, it was a very common thing that banks wanted. And then once they realized on Long Island what they actually entailed, they got away from it for a while, but they're starting to come back again. But now we have what's called septic systems. So when you have your cesspool replaced, it used to be just dig a hole, put a new cesspool in, everybody goes about their business, and you're out $5,000, $6,000. Well, we have septic systems now, which essentially is the same amount of work, but they have to be designed by a licensed septic engineer. It's a solid concrete catch bunker for your solid waste, and the liquids will overflow into the cesspool. That catch basin has to be pumped every 3 to 5 years, and that's to keep the nitrates off of our groundwater, and we could all be happy here living on the island.
No more brown tide in the Great South Bay.
So now with these septic certifications, you really want to get a real septic company in there that knows what they're doing, because the laws have changed on these septic certifications. So you have to be careful and not just get somebody that's going to run the water anymore. They have to go in, open covers, look what's going on, check linings.
Okay. So it's a much more invasive testing now than it was in the past.
Yes, and it always should have been, but it never was.
Now, this is the one, I think, if you're a homeowner now, a current homeowner, this is, like I said, earlier I said, spoiler alert, you're going to learn something here. This is a spot where you might be able to save some money. Now, I had this even on my own house, and I got to admit, I didn't know about this until I did the research before having you here today. But apparently I'm with like a quarter mile, even though I'm nowhere near the water, but I'm considered to be in a coastal storm zone for wind damage. And apparently you guys can do what's called a windstorm inspection and possibly save a homeowner some money. Can you go over that a little bit for us?
Well, windstorm inspection, we have a professional engineer on staff. But what that is, in high wind areas, flood areas, a home has to be constructed a little bit differently. Just even your typical shingle that may have, roof shingle that may have 4 nails into it. In a high wind area, it's required to have 8 nails into it. Certain other items, like your outdoor air conditioner, an oil tank, everything else has to be properly secured, strapped down against high wind and now flooding ever since Superstorm Sandy. Everybody knows that flood's an issue and potentially devastating.
Interesting. So now in a windstorm inspection would be something that a current homeowner who even has no desire and not anticipating a sale, doesn't have the house on the market, they maybe just bought the house and they may be planning to stay there for the next 20 or 30 years. But this can be a valuable resource for them to be able to potentially lower their homeowner's insurance. Yeah,
a lot of times they move in and realize, I need a windstorm inspection. Most people had no idea they even needed that until their insurance company brought it up. Said, get it or no insurance.
Now, you also do what they call a structure-only inspection. And that's a term that's new to me. So can you, and I'm sure it's going to be, if it's new to me, I'm going to assume it's new to most of our viewers.
Well, that's something like you was talking about earlier, where the person came in knowing they were going to gut the house. They were going to take everything out. Plumbing, electrical, sheetrock, insulation, and rebuild everything. But they just want to make sure what they're buying, the shell itself, is still going to be sufficient for what they plan on doing in the future. So instead of paying for the whole home inspection and us going through checking all the outlets and wiring and appliances and windows and doors, they're going to be replacing all that. So they just want to make sure that the framing, the foundation, the basics are in decent shape and they can move forward.
Being on Long Island, we deal with a number of different types of foundations. Some slabs, some have basements, half basements, crawl spaces, and such. Some of those create some challenges, I'm sure. Typically, if a house is on a slab, how would you go about inspecting that foundation? Or is it pretty much limited then to just being the structure from the wood up, so to speak, the sill plates as we were discussing?
It is a bit more challenging because obviously with a basement, you go downstairs and look up, and if something's out of place, even if you don't know what you're looking at, you can see that that piece of wood doesn't look like that piece of wood. But with a slab, you have to realize that in that slab, you have plumbing, you have the structure of the house sitting on it. So to inspect it, you're looking around the outside, you're looking for cracks, you're looking for movement. First thing any home inspector does when they pull up to a property is from the curb. They're looking at the house, looking at the shape of the house. Is anything sagging or any walls look like they're bowing out or anything is moved? Same thing when our inspectors go inside. You're going to see me outside and I'll have boots and I'll be going through your gardens and bushes and everything else. But when it's time to come inside, I put on a pair of boat shoes. That is one of my greatest tools because as I'm walking through, I'm going to feel something under my foot, whether it's a crack in a floor or even an electrical wire going under a carpet, which dangerous as can be, I still see it every month. So we're not just using our eyes. And yes, I have certain tools that I bring with me, but I'm listening for things. I'm smelling for different odors, and even my feet as I'm walking around, I feel things underfoot. So if I walk in there with my construction boots, I'm never going to feel anything.
Again, like you said, with the slab, people don't realize that there's, plumbing and heating pipes running underneath that slab. And if one of those has a problem, that's going to be very expensive. You're pulling up floors, you're going through concrete to do the repair. And that's something that, again, trained professionals such as yourself or your own home inspectors can pick out those very subtle indicators that there may be an issue underneath that, again, especially a homeowner or a potential buyer just walks right by. The homeowner's used to it. Everything, every day they become immune to it. Not because they're trying to hide something, they just don't realize it. And a buyer is looking at the whole, they're kind of overwhelmed looking at the whole house. We've talked about what home inspectors do. We've talked about what Home Sweet Home does. Are there any areas or any types of inspections that Home Sweet Home does not get involved in?
We don't inspect swimming pools. We don't inspect sprinkler systems. For the main reason that 90% of all these systems are below grade. We cannot see them. As far as a sprinkler system, we can turn the sprinkler system on and see them working. But the sprinkler heads that don't work, we can crawl around on our hands and knees all day long and never find that sprinkler head. So things like that, if an inspection company is going to say they're inspecting those for you, they're not doing you any favors. Get their service provider who takes care of their sprinkler systems. They have to be blown out every year. They can blow them out. They can put pressure tests on them to make sure everything is in good working order. Same thing with the swimming pool. It's below ground. All of the plumbing is below ground. It could be leaking 500 gallons of water a day, and they keep filling it up every night, so we're never going to know that. We're going to see that the filter is moving water. The pump is moving. Is it actually filtering things? Is their chlorination system or anything else like that working properly? Is their heating system functioning? We're there for a couple hours. We'd have to have this thing turned up for many hours to get a temperature difference that we can check. So this is where their pool company, I always tell my clients, find out who's servicing this pool now and get the information from them, because that pool company, while they may not be entirely honest with you, it will be in your favor, because what they want to do above everything else in the world is keep you as a client. Then they want to sell you things. So say there's a 15-year pool liner that they put in 5 years ago. Simple math, 10 years. They're going to tell you 7. The filtration system, yes, it works, but when you get here, you should upgrade to this model.
Gotcha.
So again, they're going to maybe not be completely honest, but it will be in your favor prior to the closing, and then do a little more investigation to make sure it's actually proper.
Now you mentioned specifically in-ground pools. What about an above-ground pool? And again, I know a lot of the same things you just mentioned about leaks and things, although some of them may be a little more accessible, depending on whether or not they built a deck around and how the landscaping is. But what about the electrical, seeing whether or not I've seen and heard about above ground pools where for the electrical, people just ran an extension cord 50 feet out to the pool.
Indeed.
I'm assuming some of the more obvious things you would point out, but is that a typical, would that be included in a report, or would that be excluded?
Those would be. Those are electrical. Those are safety issues, whether it's an in-ground pool or an above ground pool. We're going to still be looking at the electrical items with it. Quite often, yes, we'll see the extension cord running out. Or we'll see an outlet out there with the pump and filter right next to the pool within 6 feet of the water, which again, just gives us red flags saying that these pools probably don't have the proper permits. The town doesn't know about them.
They probably weren't professionally installed.
And quite often as an attorney, you'll see that they're gifting the pool to the client, knowing that, yes, there's no paperwork on it. And an above ground pool, it's a temporary structure. They're not made to last very long. I mean, 15, 20 years if you're lucky. But
again, the danger from a safety standpoint, being a temporary structure means it's easy to take, shortcuts. And again, a lot of it is just out of ignorance.
That we're looking a lot of people will put a deck around these pools. Yes, we're looking at its safety items. We're looking at things like that.
So, real quick, oil tanks. Is that something that you guys look into?
We take very good look into them. Oil tanks are a very big problem here on the island. Buried oil tanks especially. There's over 100,000 buried oil tanks on Long Island alone. It's very important to look at the tank, inspect the tank, see that it was installed and set up properly, it's properly supported. Even more important, if I go to a house that was built in the 60s and I see a tank that only looks 10 years old, I'm more concerned what happened to the old tank than the condition of this new tank. We need to know if it was abandoned, was it removed, or is it still sitting underground with oil waiting to become an environmental issue?
Or is it currently an environmental issue?
Yes.
Okay. All right. A couple of quick tips and tricks. You discussed earlier about how to hire a good inspector, what to ask them for, not just their certifications and their licensing, but their background in the industry and if they were in the trades. But if there was one thing, if you could talk to a potential client now, a purchaser of real estate, what is the one thing that you would like them to know before they sit down with Home Sweet Home?
As far as choosing a home inspector?
No, it's true. When they're going to work with you guys and they're going to hire you to do an inspection on the home that they're ready to purchase, what is that one tip or trick you would like them to know before they meet with you?
That you need to trust the person you're hiring. In this whole real estate transaction, there are two people working for you. That is the home inspector and the attorney. Most times, all these real estate agents that you sit with for months and months and months finding a home, they're working for the seller. So at some point, they're going to put a piece of paper down letting you know that you have to sign that you know that they're not working for you. But we're there for our clients. We're the only ones that are there just for them. When they get the inspection, it is their inspection. If they don't buy the home and somebody else says, hey, I know you inspected the house, can you tell us about it? No, I cannot. That is not my report. Legally, I'm not allowed to talk to anybody. Even if, Joe, you call me up as their attorney, I have to get my client's permission to speak to you about their home inspection.
Now, I'm going to flip that around. I know sellers, when you come in, and sellers know that there's going to be a home inspection, I'm sure they kind of look at you. Well, I'm sure most of them are probably very friendly and polite. They look at you a little sideways. I mean, they almost expect it to be almost an adversarial relationship. What would you like the sellers to know about home inspections in general, home inspectors, but also Home Sweet Home? When you walk in the door, what should they know about you?
Well, a lot of times they don't have much to do with us. If they're there, yes, I love to talk to them. Just get a little background, let them know who I am. We talk about how long they've been in the home and where they're heading to, and just putting each other at ease. Because as we get there, as a home inspection, our clients are extremely nervous. They're making a huge decision that typically is going to impact them for the 30-year mortgage. So at the time of the inspection, yes, they are very nervous. But that homeowner is much more nervous than anyone else in this transaction, because I'm coming into their home looking for a reason that they cannot move to the home that they've most already picked out. And here I come looking for a reason that they cannot move. So yes, they do not like to see me there. So I let my clients know this up front too, as we speak, and I will tell them that I will be talking to them throughout the inspection and I welcome them to come with me. But as I get around anybody but them, I tend to get a little quiet, because as I'm there at that home, I'm a guest in this person's home. And yes, I will see a bathroom exhaust fan that's not working, causing some wallpaper to peel. Not a big deal to fix. But if a homeowner starts hearing me talk about a little wallpaper peeling, a little loose carpet here, all they hear is, this idiot is nitpicking my house, causing me to lose a sale. I am not liking this person. I'm not liking this person for bringing him. So it sets up this relationship that's not going to go very well. So you have to be careful what you say, how you say. You need to explain things for everyone to know what's going on. And
so what a seller should understand is that you're not there to nitpick and insult them. You're not there to kill the deal. You're there to educate the buyer, so the buyer goes in with eyes open and can plan for what they have to do once they own the house, not necessarily for reasons to kill the deal.
Well, absolutely. Like I said earlier, people don't hire me not to buy the home. They want this home. They just want to know that it is what they think it is. And it's interesting. And I do have to say, from experience, you get a report. There are a lot of things, because no house is perfect. But it's the things that buyers sometimes go back to a seller for are usually only major issues. That, again, electrical safety and health issues, buyer safety issues. Typically, I find my clients as buyers really don't care about the little nitpicky stuff, because again, they go, I can fix that. I can take care of that. But when they see something like that is an electrical hazard, the big stuff. And again, once the sellers are told it, they're like, yeah, they accept it, and they go, yeah, I wouldn't want to live here. And most of them, if they knew about it, would have fixed it themselves, because
they're living in that house as well.
That, and it also depends on the market. I've been in this a long time, and I've seen when the sellers had the upper hand. I've seen when the buyers had the upper hand.
Yeah.
There were times when a seller would fix every little thing they possibly could just to sell a home.
And now
right now, we're not in that situation.
Yeah. Now, I can't tell you how many times I've got to now get a buyer, say, don't make a contingent upon, sign the contracts, but still get somebody in there so you have some education about what you've got to plan for.
Yeah. Well, like I said, even fixing things. We do inspections for sellers as well. A seller wants me to come in prematurely to make sure that they're not going to have any giant roadblocks. And I will go through and I will come up with a list of maybe 30 things that need to be repaired in this house. And the homeowner will constantly ask me, well, which one should I repair? And I tell them, none. You don't repair a thing until it becomes an issue and you're willing to repair it. Because you can go through this house and spend $30,000 making it perfect, and the person you're buying your house with only cared about a $300 item.
Or they come in with another inspector who finds something else that, because again, house is not frozen in time. Anyway, Jim, I want to thank you so much for being here. If you want to find Jim and Home Sweet Home Inspections, their contact information will be at the end of this video. Again, I want to thank everybody for watching today and hope we learned a little bit more about the home inspection industry. Again, both as buyers know that they need home inspections. They should get it, even if they're waiving it as part of their contract, because again, we're in that tight market. And again, sellers, as Jim said, you can get a pre-inspection so that you can have an idea about what you may be looking at when you do sell it. More importantly, if your insurance is homeowner's insurance is charging you for being in a storm zone, you have an option of getting a windstorm inspection and maybe knocking that premium down. As always, I want to thank you for watching. If you have any questions or follow-up, you can find me on beigelaw.com. Call me in the office. I'll be happy to speak to you. Thank you.